Morning, everybody. It's always such a fun time to be here. I love your humor. That was really great. Let me see, I'm gonna turn this little light on. Oh, look at that, this is the light of mine. I can almost see some of you. I can't see your faces. I'll bet that's Bill. Is that Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell from the glow around you, Bill. And I heard that there's someone here who had a birthday on June 8th. Was that Nancy? Somebody? So did I. Oh, there you are. Okay, that was my birthday too. Yeah. So some of us have probably attended an award ceremony at some point in our lives. You know, when someone has done something that's been kind of worthy and they get to have a whole ceremony, an award ceremony. Maybe they get a trophy, maybe a scholarship, maybe they won the Nobel Peace Prize or something. And it's really an inspiration to us when we listen to what someone has done, someone like that they've done something that was really something that really did something good for society or for their community or something. So, and I thought I might start with a different kind of an award today. How many have heard of the Stella Awards? Well, I don't know if you're holding your hands up or not. It's very dark in here. I see your hand, Bill. Your hand is always up, isn't it? Well, anyway, the Stella Awards, they were actually named after an 81-year-old woman named Stella Lybeck. Anybody heard of her? No. No, okay. She's the woman, you probably know what happened to her. She spilled hot coffee on herself and then she sued McDonald's.
Yeah.
She actually she went in and ordered hot coffee, it's what she wanted. And then when she got in her car, she took the lid off and she was balancing it between her knees and driving.
Yeah.
And she got burned. And so she actually sued McDonald's for the coffee that she wanted in the first place and that she spilled on herself. And she actually was awarded, what was it? She was awarded $160,000 in medical expenses and $2.7 million in punitive damages. Now, I don't know about you, but I could use money. I'm willing to spill some coffee on myself. But so they started these awards called the Stella Awards to see how many silly lawsuits have actually been money has been awarded to people through lawsuits that you wouldn't think would actually go through. So there was a man named Terrence Dickinson. He's from Pennsylvania. He had just burglarized a house. So he's trying to make his getaway and he goes running out into the garage thinking he's going to go escape through the garage door. There was nobody home. And unfortunately for him, the garage door opener wouldn't work. So he's stuck there. So he tries to go back in the house to make his getaway in a different way. And the door had locked behind him. So poor guy, he's stuck in the house. He's stuck in that house for 8 days with nothing more than a case of Coca-Cola and a big bag of dry dog food.
Oh, wow.
So he considered that he was having undue mental anguish. He actually sued the homeowner's insurance company. And he won. He won $500,000 anyway. Now, can you imagine? I mean, I'm sure that he was an inspiration to future burglars of America. You know, make sure garage door openers are going to work for you if you're going to escape that way. That's not something we want to be inspired by, right? I think we all want to be an inspiration to people, don't we? We all want to feel that we can do something or have done something that inspires people, that uplifts people. And we all have, we might say, well, gosh, what do I do? What do I have to do or to say? Or what skills do I have that can inspire other people? But the answer to that is a lot. We all have some way to inspire people, don't we? I think we do. I think we can make a difference in so many different ways. We make a difference by example. Even random acts of kindness can inspire people. We don't have to be a first responder who saves 100 lives, you know, people from a fire. We don't have to reform a religion. We don't have to run a marathon with an artificial leg or anything like that. We do little things. Every day we do little things that inspire each other and inspire other people around us. Sometimes it seems like Well, yeah, sometimes it seems like we're accidentally inspiring people. I'm thinking of a man named W. Mitchell. How many are familiar with the story of a man named W. Mitchell? I know probably Bill is.
Oh, yeah, right. He forgot. Yeah.
I met W. Mitchell back in, I think it was 1988, and he goes by the name Mitchell. Mitchell was a young man who liked living in the fast lane. He was flying planes. He loved motorcycles, anything fast. And it was in 1971 that he had just gotten a new motorcycle. The day before, he had just done his first solo flight in a plane. And this day, he had just gotten a new motorcycle. He's on his way to see his girlfriend. He didn't see the laundry truck that backed out ahead of him, and he crashed into it with his motorcycle. Of course, the gasoline went all over the place. A huge fireball went up, and he was burned quite severely. He lost his face. He lost both of his hands. Someone passing by happened to have access to fire extinguisher, so they put out the fire and got him to the hospital. So it saved his life. He was in the hospital. He was in a coma for several weeks, and plastic surgeons managed to put somewhat of a face back on the front of his skull. It was a face that made children go running and screaming monster, but at least it was a bit of a face. He still had no hands. But Mitchell didn't let that get him down. And about 4 years later, I think it took him about 4 years or 5 years to recover from that. So it was in 1975, he was still able to fly a plane, even without hands. He just had a stub on each wrist. He was able to fly a plane, and so he was living in California at that time. Actually, even before that, he had run for mayor of Preston Butte, California, Colorado. And his campaign slogan was not just another pretty face. And so in 1975, he was taking people places in a small plane, transferring them to places. And he happened to be with a couple of people in his plane, and he thought that the ice had melted off the plane, but it hadn't, and they crashed. And this time he remembered, of course, the fireball that he had lost his face and hands with. And so he told the other people quickly get out of the plane, and they did. And he tried to get out, but his foot was stuck somehow under the console of the plane. He ended up in a wheelchair the rest of his life. His spine was totally crashed. So here he is in a wheelchair, no hands, a face that would make you scream monster, and yet that didn't hold him down. And he used to say, before my accidents, I could do 10,000 things. Now I can only do 9,000 things. I can focus on the 1,000 things I can't do anymore, or I can focus on the 9,000 that I still can. And today he's a motivational speaker, even in his wheelchair. I met him at a WinStar symposium one time. I went up afterwards to shake his hand and realized he didn't have any, but he was such an inspiration to people. And that's a huge way of inspiring people. We don't want to do it that way, right? We inspire people in little ways. Now, one of the people that inspires me is one of my best friends, Wilma. She's often here with me. She didn't come with me today. Wilma's going to be 90 years old next week. And she is such a light, such a fireball, because everybody is inspired by Wilma. She lives her passions, and her passions are wildflowers, black bears, and synchronous fireflies. Now, she spent many years leading hikes in the Smoky Mountains, teaching people about the wildflowers and our connection with the flower kingdom, our connection with nature. She wrote a little book on black bears and how we can help preserve the black bears in the Smokies. That's her passion. And then synchronous fireflies. She often takes groups of us to see the synchronous fireflies, and really the only place in the world that they happen, if you're familiar with them, are in the Smokies. And so we've gone with her for those. But just because she's living her passion, she's an inspiration. And we all have something we could be inspiring people with that way. Sometimes it might just be a smile or listening to someone. We all want to be heard. And that reminds me of something that Wilma's granddaughter sent to her for Christmas, not last year, but the year before. Her granddaughter gave her a list of 52 questions to answer, one a week. Wilma loves to type on the computer, and so her granddaughter wanted her to answer one question every week and send it to me. And these are questions about her life story. Now, I don't know about any of you, but a lot of the friends that I know as we're getting in our later years, our kids don't really seem to be asking us questions about our lives, but we want to share our lives, don't we? I think most of us do. We want to be able to tell the things that we've done in our lives and have someone be a listener to us. So I just felt like that was such a wonderful, inspiring way to gift her grandmother with the understanding that she's interested. She wants to know more. I have another friend who started to teach Reiki. She didn't know anything about Reiki, energy healing. She started to teach it, and she started her own healing center where she spends her winters in Mexico. And she's taught many of the Mexican women down there energy healing, and they take it out into their communities and inspire other people. I'm inspired by my children, all three of my children, but especially my youngest, my daughter, Lori. She's almost 50. She's my little ray of sunshine. And just the way that she relates to people is an inspiration to me. And her husband, my son-in-law, Bill, had a stroke about 12 years ago. He was 51 years old. And he was a very healthy person. He had a healthy lifestyle. They didn't know that he had a very tiny pinhole leak in a carotid artery. And all of a sudden, he had a stroke. And his whole life had been about communication. Bill was working for the Labor Department as a negotiator. He was also a realtor. He taught college classes. Speaking and communicating was his whole life. And with his stroke, he lost everything. He could not speak one word. And it took years for him to learn to form letters and then form words and then put sentences together. But in his process, and he couldn't go back, of course, to the work that he was doing before, but part of his healing was art therapy. And in that art therapy, he learned to be a beautiful artist. I mean, he never even could draw stick figures before. Now he does portraits of people and they look like a photograph. He's a beautiful artist up in Cleveland, Ohio. He's got his own little studio, but he never gave up. And when he was in the hospital that first day with his stroke, the doctor was standing right next to the bed, and my daughter Lori, his wife, standing right next to him. And the doctor turned to Lori and said, you know, he's probably never going to walk again. And my daughter took that doctor out into the hallway and said, don't you ever say anything like that in front of my husband again. Because things like that take our inspiration down. They make us feel like it's hopeless. But it was that very sentence that inspired my son-in-law to know that he was one day going to show that doctor he was going to recover. And nowadays he speaks quite well. He even started a group for stroke patients to encourage them, and he speaks in front of them. So, you know, there's so many ways that we end up inspiring people without ever even intending to. He didn't intend to have a stroke. PBS made a special on strokes, and they focused on Lori and Bill and my granddaughter Sierra. It's about a half-hour PBS special with the Cleveland Clinic and all of that. If anyone ever wants to watch that, give me an email and I'll send it to you. It's very inspirational. How many are familiar with Mr. Rogers? You know, Mr. Rogers, our kids, our grandkids probably used to watch them. He said one time that when he was a child, his mother used to, when he would watch something on TV on the news that was scary, he'd get really scared. And his mother would always say, well, look for the helpers. Anytime there's something scary on the news, look for the helpers. There's always people that are there trying to help the situation. Nowadays, I would suggest we not even watch the news, just turn it off. It's a little different now than it was back in Mr. Rogers' day when he was a child. It's really something for us to not watch at all, because it takes us away from having the hope. There's not much that's inspirational on the news these days, so kind of a good thing to stay away from. There was a young boy who was very shy. He never was able to make friends very well when he was a child. His father was in the military, and so they moved frequently. And every time he would make a friend in school, they would be moving and he'd have to start all over again. He just didn't feel comfortable in his own skin. When he became a teenager, one day he got the idea to take his guitar with him to school. And on a break, he was just strumming his guitar, sang a little bit, and the kids started to gather around him. And he started to make some friends. But mostly, he spent his time like climbing trees. As a child, he loved to climb trees, and he would sit in a tree and he would be daydreaming. He would have this vision that one day he was going to have friends all over the world. And one day he was going to have a place where all of his friends were going to come together and they were going to talk about all the ways that we could inspire people to save the world, because he was so impassioned about the environment. Later on, he was still strumming his guitar and singing his songs, and eventually was able to make a record. I guess it was a record in those days, a CD, whatever it was. And he had an agent, and the agent said, we can't fit your whole name on a record. His name, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, his name was Henry John Duchendorf. So his agent said, we're going to have to make a different name for you. Of course, what's the name they chose for him? John Denver. That's how he became John Denver. And in 1976, his dream came true. He made his dream came true. By that time, he had friends all over the world, of course, with his music. And he found a piece of property in Colorado, in Snowmass, Colorado, and he established an organization there, an environmental educational organization. He called it WinStar. He co-founded it with a friend, and he would have an annual symposium that drew people from all over the world. The first one I went to, I was involved with him all the way until he died. The first one I went to was in 1988, and I think that's the year that W. Mitchell was one of our presenters. And we had about almost 2,000 people there. It was held in Aspen, Colorado. And of course, John sang his songs, which are an inspiration in every way, shape, and form, because his songs are always based on true stories that he's experienced or things that he wants to inspire people about. One of our presenters also was Dennis Weaver. How many remember Dennis Weaver? Yeah, what was his name? Chester from Gunsmoke, there you go. And he, of course, was inspired by John, and then he himself started an organization for part of the Hunger Project. He called it LIFE, Life, which was an acronym for Love is Feeding Everyone. And so, he's inspired by John, and people are inspired by what he does. He went out into the world and started hunger projects here and there. So that's how inspiration is so contagious. We inspire other people just by living our own passion. I've been very inspired by someone who, when she was a little girl, her father was a traveling minister. And the whole family, this little girl's name was Julia, and up until Julia was 10 years old, they lived in a camper, a motorhome, because her father traveled around to different churches. So she and her mother and father and two brothers all lived in this camper the whole first 10 years of her life. They traveled around and they stayed in campgrounds, and Julia was really connected with nature. She's another one who loved to climb trees, just like John Denver did. And when Julia was in her 20s, she was in an almost fatal car accident. It took her a long time to be able to walk again and to speak normally again. And she was just really so grateful for her getting her life back again. She started to go on a kind of a spiritual quest. And because she had such a love of nature, that took her into some of the wilderness, living in California at that time. She happened to be in Northern California when there were some loggers that were going to be clear cutting some of the ancient redwoods. Now, I know how devastating that is. I had driven through, when I was living out west, I had driven through, I think it was Sequoia National Park or Kings Canyon. And one area that I had driven through with a friend, It had been clear cut, and it was like going to a cemetery. We both cried just to see these ancient trees. And they're not even really good for much other than creating toothpicks or paper plates or something. So it was so devastating. And so she was with these environmental activists, and they were trying to stop the loggers from taking down these ancient trees. And they said, well, what we need is someone to sit in one of those trees so that the loggers, surely they won't cut it down if someone's sitting in it. And Julie, of course, loved to climb trees. So she was willing to get up in one of the trees. It was 180 feet tall, 1,000-year-old redwood tree that they wanted to cut down. So she climbed up, and she could climb to the very tippy top. If you go online, you can see pictures of her standing on the very tippy top with her arms outstretched. She went up there, and the group that was around her on the ground, they were hoisting things up for her, because she knew she might be there for a week or two. So they hoisted up some wood that she could form a platform to sit on, and maybe a blanket, because if she's there for a little while, you know, Northern California, it can rain, it can snow, it can be windy. She ended up being there for 2 years and 8 days. Her name is Julia Butterfly Hill. How many have heard of her and know her story? And you can see all of that online, her story, pictures of her. She's now a motivational speaker. She wrote a book called Legacy of Luna. Luna is the name that they gave to the tree, this 1,000-year-old tree that she sat in for over 2 years, never came down. I know what you're wondering, how'd she go to the bathroom? I know. People ask her that question, and she said, we're not gonna talk about that, but she did write about it in her books. I don't know either. But what an inspiration, and she was constantly harassed the whole time she was up there by the loggers, because they wanted to take that tree down, and she was harassed by helicopters. They would have helicopters circling the top of that tree, coming almost close enough to touch her. And it was not a pretty sight, but she really was so dedicated. One of the things that she teaches now, because she speaks all over the world, she teaches about disposability consciousness. She says whenever we think we're disposing of something, we think we're throwing it away. And her question is, where is away? There is no away. I was at a potluck. In fact, it was at our Creative Thought Center not long ago. I was at a potluck, and usually we use regular dishes, but for some reason that day they had a stack of paper plates, paper napkins, plastic forks, plastic spoons, paper cups with plastic lids. Now, all of these paper products come from a forest somewhere on Earth that was cut down. The plastic things basically are a petroleum product that came from some of the oil reserves that we have gone into South America and taken their oil and left devastating pollution without cleaning up. So what Julia says is, where is away? We can't throw something away. When we throw it away, it's still on Earth. It still has to either go to a landfill or get burned, or we're trashing the Earth, in other words. So one thing that I was inspired to do, and I've done this for years, I have in my car always an Earth Care kit. It's simply a plate, a regular plate that can be reused. I have my own silverware wrapped in a cloth napkin. I have a little metal cup that could be for soup or for drinking. I keep it in a Ziploc bag. If I go to a picnic, a potluck, or even to a friend's house, if they're gonna have paper plates out, I wanna make a statement. I'm not gonna use the disposables because there's nowhere we can throw it away without trashing the earth. You know, we're just like a small group of people, but there's 8 billion of us on the planet. If we all trash the earth, what are we saying about our care for this beautiful planet that we live on? And so I carry that with me, and people always notice, and they always say, well, that's a good idea, but that they don't really do it. So I made a proposal to our board at the Creative Thought Center that from now on, we are never, ever going to have a stack of paper plates, paper napkins, plastic forks and spoons, because, you know, people would take one plate and eat their meal and throw it away. They take another one for dessert, throw it away. Handful of napkins, go like that, throw them away. All of that at the end of one little potluck with just a few people, And the whole trash can was filled, overflowing with all the things that we're going to be throwing back on the earth. So we're going to be making some, I already have made some of these kits, I call them earth care kits, with a regular plate and all of that stuff in it. We're gonna ask for a donation, and the donations in our church up there. And the donations we're going to use to put a filter on our kitchen sink at the Creative Thought Center, so people can also bring their own water containers. We're not gonna sell any more or give any more of those plastic water bottles that people drink a little bottle of water, throw it away. Those end up in our oceans. Those end up in our rivers. So as much as we can, we're going to try to encourage people to be responsible for how we treat the earth. This is all about how we treat the earth. And I think there's so many ways that each one of us can inspire other people. I'm going to close with some of the ridiculous things that we celebrate. You know, I like to look up every month what celebrations or what holidays are in that month. And you mentioned that today's Flag Day, right?
No, the 14th.
Oh, the 14th, okay. Well, there's another thing on the 14th, but I'll get to that in a minute. Today is June 11th. Well, today is Corn on the Cob Day. Hey, celebrate corn on the cob. But you know, some of you maybe your passion is organic gardening. Maybe you can grow vegetables and help other people to know how the importance of organic gardening as opposed to using pesticides. That may be your passion. June 4th was Hug Your Cat Day. Maybe some of you are passionate about animals. Up near where I live in Waynesville, there's a place called FUR, F-U-R, Feline Urgent Rescue. And a woman started it because she loves cats. She has a 2-story house. She doesn't live in the house. It's dedicated to cats. Cats that have been abandoned, or they're feral cats or whatever. She finds them, people bring them cats, and I visit it. I go there every now and then just to play with the kittens because they need people to come and socialize with the animals. And she had about 90 some cats in that house, the times that I've gone. And yet it's very clean. It's a 2-story, but there's everywhere you look, there's kitty cats running around. And she's got lots of toys and lots of things for them to climb. It's very clean, but she cares so much about cats that she's devoted her life to that. June 13 is Sewing Machine Day. How many are going to celebrate that? Somebody does. Huh? Maybe your passion is making craft items that have a nice slogan on them, or t-shirts that have a good slogan on them, or whatever. There's lots of things you can do with a sewing machine that can inspire other people. June 15th, Nature Photography Day. You can make calendars, cards, beautiful things we can do with photography. And June 14th, in addition to being Flag Day, it's Bourbon Day. There's not a lot we can do with Bourbon Day to inspire
Toast
people.
the flag.
But there are so many ways. There are so many ways. And so I just really encourage all of us to find our passion. It's really about passion. It's really that all of us have something that we would love to be able to share with other people. Maybe you have someone in your family, maybe someone in your community, maybe someone in the outer community where you live that could use some other ideas of ways that they can be on this earth. Because it's really up to us, you know, we are all in this together. We are creating the future. We are creating the world that we're going to leave for our children, our grandchildren, future generations. And if we sit home and see all the things going on in the world and maybe wring our hands and say, there's nothing I can do about it. None of us can save the world, the whole world, but we all can play our part. We all can do something. Maybe it's reading to someone who's elderly or sight impaired or something, reading books to them. Maybe it's helping out in a daycare center. Maybe it's getting your own workout. Maybe it's doing public speaking. Maybe you should be up here. Maybe I should sit down and let you all come up here and do a speech. Anyway, we're all in this together. Let's find our passion. Let's let that be our purpose, because we all have it in us. I think that's why God put us on this earth, to be here at this time, because this is a time when we are so needed and our passion is needed. So let's go out in the world today and inspire somebody. Inspire somebody. Namaste.